Greetings sailors, and welcome to an older replay of mine featuring the King George V. Now, this is old enough that actually I was grinding the ship. I was going through the line at this point, and having said that, I've only just, as of like a week ago, unlocked and bought the Conqueror, so it's taken me a while to get to the top of the line. And for reference, this particular game was played in, I think, September of last year, so this one's been sat around for a while, and also that's how long it's taken me to get the Conqueror. I don't need to tell you too much about the ship itself. It has 14-inch guns, it's got that monster HE, and because it's only got 14-inch guns only at this tier, that means it gets also quite a fast rate of fire. And you couple that fast rate of fire with that monster HE, and there's a reason why you see these things going around firing an awful lot of it. It's not just that it's got that fire chance, it's also that nasty reload on top of it. But when I played it, I was trying to use both ammo types intelligently, and that's obviously the design behind this ship, is that they had the thought that people would, you know, they would use the ammo as appropriate. But in practice, of course, that's not what players do. That's, you know, it's lovely in theory, but it's like, what's the example Jingles used once upon a time with the one of the tanks? T-54, there we go. T-54 and heat ammo, where people were using the gun that had superior stats in every way except penetration, and then just firing premium ammo with it. So, you know, theory is all nice and lovely, but when you actually then let that loose with the players, they tend to just ignore the theory and do the thing that's going to give them the best result. And you can just fire HE with this ship. Nothing but HE, and you will get good results. So, yeah. In a way, using AP at all, it could be seen as a bit of a poor choice. But I don't know, I felt like trying to do the honourable thing, so to speak, and at least trying to use the AP ammo as appropriate, because it's not bad for its tier. When this line was announced, there was some speculation that the King George V's would go at tier 8. But the guns would have had to be seriously overbuffed to be competitive against tier 10, and in turn that would have made them extremely powerful against tier 6s. But as it is, they of course put it in at tier 7, and we also got Nelson as our tier 7 free XP ship for this line. And, well, then we essentially also got this ship at tier 8, except with 15-inch guns. But because of the nature of the British battleship 15-inch guns, it does feel a bit lackluster. It's the same with the hoods, and, well, not so much the Queen Elizabeth and the Warspite, because at tier 6 it doesn't matter that much that they don't have super good penetration. But once you get to tier 8, and even the hood at tier 7, yeah, you do feel it. It's not a particularly potent combination. So although it's still a reasonably tough ship at tier 8, you know, this hull essentially, it's a bit lacking in the firepower department. I don't know many people that are fans of the Monarch especially. So this is Neighbours, and, well, you can see exactly what the team is doing. It's a standard game. Standard games on this map are always awkward in my experience, and the team that starts on this spawn tends to go north, the team that starts on the other spawn tends to go south, and then usually there's a race around the corners of the map to get to the other team's cap. But this isn't going to be quite the usual Neighbours game. I mean, for one thing, I've decided, okay, this is probably not a good idea to just keep going that way. We need to at least have some people defending the cap, so I've turned around. But crucially, I'm not going to be the only one. That's what is going to make this game different, is that it's not just going to be one or two people desperately holding off hordes of red ships trying to cap their base. We are, however, going to lose our carrier fairly soon. The enemy T-22 has got them well within spotting range, so that's not so good in terms of the enemy carrier just having free reign. But we've already seen some evidence that the enemy carrier maybe isn't the best player in the world, just from the fact that they tried to send their strike after me whilst I was in the middle of, what, 3-4 cruisers? So, yeah, that turned out to be not such a smart plan. They lost most of their first strike wave doing that. So I'm trying to pick on this poor unfortunate Nuremberg at the moment, who is giving me quite a lot of broadside, and if I can strike lucky with these guns, well, I've already done nearly 60k damage, which is not completely terrible. It's going to be rather more than that by the end of this game, and I believe I'm correct in saying this is one of my higher average damage battleships, and I'm sure there are people that have way higher average damage in it even still, just because, as I've said, of that combination of a fast rate of fire and monster HE. So of the enemy team, well, there's not that many that actually did go south. That's possibly one of the reasons why this has worked out the way it has. Quite a few of them stuck around in that northern half of the map, and there were a few that went further south than that. But it means that there isn't a big blob of ships rushing at us from the south that we don't know about. Instead, we pretty much know where everything is, and because there's this scattered island cover in the way, it means that, well, there isn't quite the trading of health and damage that perhaps there could be at this point. So at range against the Scharnhorst, I'm onto the HE shells at this stage. Although he is broadside, you know, the AP would probably work quite well here, but I think my thought was probably, let's stick some fires on them, let's get some dot damage ticking away, and at that point switch to AP. And this ship in particular would probably be quite a good one to have expert loader on, just as a random thought, because you've already got that shorter reload, and because there are times when having your other shells available at shorter notice would actually be quite useful. So that big hit there was almost certainly the enemy Colorado. In fact, it would have been the enemy Colorado. There's nothing else that could have hit me that hard. The Scharnhorst is still giving lots of broadside, so they're not such a big threat, and I'm still sticking with the HE shells, so maybe my thought was just try and burn them down quickly. And of course with the British HE, it actually gets higher pen value to start with, so even if you're not necessarily setting all of the fires with every salvo, you can still get some pretty good damage, which is why when you get to the Conqueror, when you've got with the, what is it, with his the 18-inch guns, which probably not that many people use, but it's like a 60+% fire chance, so you're already dropping these HE nuclear bombs on people's heads and getting fires out of it as almost a guaranteed thing, which is, it's why, having bought it, and oh, there we go, nice hit on that Cleveland. Yeah, having bought the Conqueror, I thought I was, you know, just playing a bit incautiously to start with, but then I realised, no, people are actually focusing me because I'm in a Conqueror, and people know exactly how dangerous the Conqueror is. So it is a bit of a double-edged sword, really, when you get something like that with that kind of reputation, even if I am trying to use AP shells as appropriate, as I did with the Lion. But the Conqueror just has such a fearsome reputation, even compared to something like the Lion, that yeah, no, I'm going to have to adopt a rather more cautious playstyle, because otherwise I'm just getting absolutely hammered. So from the minimap, as you can see, as I intimated earlier on, the thing that's different is that we've all returned, pretty much. There's one or two outliers, including that Akatsuki, who is probably not going to last too much longer, but because we've all stuck together, because we're pooling our firepower, because, as I like to say, we have blobbed up, we're actually holding our own. And instead of being picked apart with our teams scattered across the map, instead we represent quite a dangerous knot of firepower, which the enemy team is having quite a hard time dealing with. And we're actually, in fact, doing better than them in terms of trading health and ships. And there's also a side benefit there as well, of course, that because we're all together, the enemy carrier doesn't have any easy lone prey to pick on. So that's now over 100,000 damage done, and my third kill. I've also got 2 heals left and a decent amount of health, so I'm not looking in too bad of a condition, although having mentioned planes, yes, there are some coming in at this point, but there's my catapult fighter doing its work. And this is, again, a thing I can point out and say, yeah, the enemy carrier player probably was not the best. They were not the threat they could have been, because they had these fighters hovering nearby and easily could have taken out my catapult fighter first. And instead, my catapult fighter was able to disrupt the drop, and my allied cruisers were able to kill some of the planes. So I've turned around and we're now facing the enemy and maybe even pushing forwards a bit, but there's a bit of a spread in terms of where they are in front of us. There's some on my port quarter and some on my starboard quarter, and they're all firing at me as the lead ship and probably the highest threat ship left alive. So I'm starting to run down on health a little bit now under this focus, but I'm still punching away myself. I'm still trying to do what damage I can. And I've actually got, I think, a higher damage game than this one. And I don't know if those are my two highest games, highest damage games overall, but the damage potential of this thing is pretty good. And it's just that one. I actually looked at it when I was deciding which one to use for a video. That one was just far less of an interesting replay to watch. It was mainly me running after things and in particular picking on a couple of enemy battleships with HE shells. It was a bit, you know, it was high damage, but damage isn't everything when it comes to making interesting videos. So there's only a couple of enemy ships left at this point. I would very much like to get my final heal going, but it's not going to take a lot more to kill me, especially as that Colorado is so relatively close. I'm going to try and stick some fires on them though, and if I can get another 20 seconds of life, I can at least get that heal back. However, here's where I get greedy and incautious and try and angle out enough to get my rear guns into play as well, which is going to give that Colorado a much nicer target to shoot at. So with just scant seconds before my heal comes back, I basically gave my ship away. So despite having, I think, played relatively well up to that point, yeah, I was just a bit too eager to try and get all my guns on that Colorado to try and get them to burn out, and ended up dying. Which was entirely my own fault. I think I probably could have lived through that salvo if I hadn't swung out that hard. So I've sped up this last bit while we watch the team wending their way towards victory, and I think it probably took a little longer than it needed to, but we have by this point established quite a firm points lead, and so really everybody just needs to focus fire and not die. I will say, if you're noticing the chat, I was possibly a little bit on the unnecessarily sarcastic side. I was trying to be, you know, trying to give some somewhat helpful advice, but it is entirely possible that this game came after a string of like defeats, which is always frustrating. And when I get frustrated, I get sarcastic, basically. I don't get mad, I don't get shouty, I just get very sarcastic. So it might come through in the chat a little bit there. I was particularly wondering why on earth that Cleveland was taking such a roundabout route, especially when that now leaves their carrier to pick on the König. It is just the two ships left though, but it's not, you know, we're down to the last minute. If they manage to kill this König, and if they maybe kill something else, that might have tipped it in their favour, but as it was, we were just far enough ahead of points. So in spite of ourselves, we have won this one. We cut it rather closer than we needed to, but at least part of the blame I must take on my own shoulders for giving my ship away when I really didn't need to. But there's kind of an irony there that we played so well in the first part of the match, where everyone was sticking together, everyone was pooling their firepower, and then in the latter half of the match everyone kind of split apart and everyone was no longer focusing fire, and that's the part where things got a bit more dicey. But as it was, no, we did well enough in that earlier part of the match, and I in particular did well enough, had almost 2,000 base XP in that game, which is not too shabby, that it was enough of a lead for us later on. But I could easily have seen that going the other way. So the KGV, this one I did hang on to, although mainly I play it in tier 7 ops these days. If I do take it into a random game, it doesn't tend to be this. In fact, it tends to be its brother ship, the Duke of York, which is pretty much the same, except with a slow rate of fire and a hydro. And the hydro is very useful, but the slow rate of fire honestly just feels like it makes it more fair, more balanced to, you know, play against other people. You've still got that monster HE, but you're not pumping it out quite as fast. So, I don't know. I do wonder at some point if we might not see a KGV nerf, but if they were going to, surely they would have by now. I don't know. Anyway. So, hopefully you enjoyed this replay, and if you did, you can do all the usual things down under the video, and, as always, stay tuned for more.